Hi, I'm Katrina Robinson, and today I'm going to talk about co-living and how to run it from afar.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owners Association, where real estate investors have found success since 1968. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 541. Most people think affordable housing is a government problem, but a growing number of investors are building a different kind of solution. Co-living homes that house multiple residents under one roof, generate strong cash flow, and serve people who need it most. My guest today is Katrina Robinson. She operates 3 co-living homes in San Antonio, Texas, through her company, Roundtable Living. And she coaches aspiring group homeowners on how to build and run this business profitably. Today, we're talking about how the group home model works, what it takes to operate it well, and why this corner of real estate is worth paying attention to. Katrina, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this co-living model.
I'm Katrina Robinson, and I live in Los Angeles, California, but my 3 co-living homes are actually in San Antonio, Texas. And so I got into it because I was really interested in assisted living initially. And so I went to the training for assisted living, learned all about assisted living, and I was actually under contract to buy an existing assisted living facility when I had a family emergency happen and my sister passed away and I got custody of her 2 children. So during that time, I just didn't want any additional risk in paying for overhead and things like that. I didn't want the stress of that. So I pulled out of that deal. And I started thinking about other ways that I could get into affordable housing for people, providing affordable housing, but also maximize my cash flow because I've always been interested in real estate, but I was getting a little measly, like $200 a month on each property. And I really wanted to maximize that. And I knew that through assisted living, I could maximize that. So I started looking into other ways, and a friend of mine mentioned independent co-living. And so I started studying that, going down a rabbit hole in YouTube and learned all about independent co-living. And I opened my first house in San Antonio, and it was a huge house. I put 15 beds in that house, and I charged $560 a month. So it was affordable housing as long as the people were independent. And so 560, times 15 was 8,400 was the gross income on that one house. And so I was pocketing about $5,000 plus each month. And by then I was sold on it. So I opened my second home and I opened my third home. And now I coach other people on how to do it.
What would you say are the differences and similarities between assisted living and what you're doing now?
So assisted living is where you rent out a bed to a person, or you rent out a room, a private room or shared room, and you provide services. So you provide help with activities of daily living, ADLs. Whereas what I do, co-living, I still rent out the rooms, either private room or shared room, but I'm not providing any services at all. So no personal care services, no medical or non-medical services. Is strictly housing that I'm providing for people. But they have the benefit of having this affordable bed. And when they pay their one rate for the month, it includes all utilities too. So they've got this low rent that they're paying each month. And they also have the community aspect of living with other people.
What is there in particular about the type of resident that you're catering toward? Are they just low income, or do they have some sort of disability? What is it that separates this from like normal co-living arrangements where you just have a group of strangers living in a house?
My first house, most of the people there have some kind of disability. So they're receiving SSDI. And that's how they're paying their rent. But they're not the type of disability where they can't take care of themselves. They can feed themselves and bathe themselves. They just might have a mild mental disorder. And so those are the types of people who I house in the first house. The second house is working professionals, so people who have jobs, but they're low income. They're not the type of jobs where they can have their own apartment. So they might work at the local grocery store or something like that. So I've got some working people in there, and then I have some elderly people in there too.
What kind of requirements do you have on the municipal level to be able to operate a property like this?
There are no permits required because I'm not providing any services at all. So it's just like if you were to take a residential house and then rent out each room to a college student. It's the same kind of situation where a permit is not required.
Put it in context for me, because I've looked at adult foster care homes before, which it sounds like there's shades of that with what you're doing, but not necessarily. Assisted living, of course, like you just said, you're assisting the residents. Where does this fall in the spectrum of like group homes, co-living arrangements, and kind of take us through the different options there?
So some states call what I do a group home. And in Texas, up until 2025, it was called a group home. But in 2025, a law was passed that actually defines group home. So a group home in Texas, you are providing some kind of service, but it's non-medical. And I actually don't provide any services at all. So what I do is basically just shared housing or co-living. But the people who I house, I'm open to people who have disabilities. It's not just working professionals like some other co-living platforms such as Pad Split.
You mentioned that one of your houses is kind of the working class professional, and then one is senior. Do they all have some sort of disability that allows them to be in the house?
No, not all of them have a disability. Some are just working people, but they're low income.
And who pays for them to be there? Are they paying for themselves, or is there some sort of program that helps pay their rent?
There are programs who help pay rent, but for my people right now, all of them are private pay. But I have had people who were being helped by some kind of nonprofit. So there are nonprofits who sometimes can pay the rent for people depending on their requirements. But right now, 100% of my people are private pay.
Help me understand, then the differences in the type of rent that the different residents would pay. Like what do they pay in assisted living? What do they pay in your co-living situation, especially if they're paying themselves?
So in assisted living, people pay as low as about $3,500 a month per bed. And that could be in a shared room. It really depends on where you are in the country, because some areas of the country, people pay $10,000 a month for a private room usually, but they're getting their meals. They have a nurse. They've got caregivers. So there's the overhead for the owner and operator of that business. There is overhead. But for my type of business, I'm not providing any of those services at all. I'm only providing a bed to the person and also the utilities. So I charge as low as $650 a month for a bed in a shared room. So if you go into assisted living, there is definitely more income potential because you can charge so much more per bed. But with the way I do it, I'm not charging as much. But I'm also not paying as much because I don't have any employees. I don't have any staff. I do have an operations manager that I pay for a part-time work to go and just check on the house for me. And if there's some kind of maintenance issue, he deals with that. Or if there are any resident issues, he deals with that too. So the residents can text him and he can text them back through that line. And I can also see what's going on. I focus a lot on automations, and that's getting into my coaching program, but I focus on how to run this efficiently and from afar. But it's to answer your question though about the income potential. There's a lot more income potential if you do the assisted living route, but you also have more expenses. And then on the co-living route that I do charge a lower amount because the people who I target are low income people. That's my demographic, is low income. I house people they work low income jobs, or they're elderly and they're receiving some kind of assistance, or they have a disability and they're receiving SSDI. And then I also have people who are reentry, so people who are formerly incarcerated, who I house as well.
How do you make sure that your tenant mix works and that you don't have everyone fighting with each other or problems? Like when you bring in a lot of strangers together, you never know what's going to happen.
Yes, definitely. I have a lot of horror stories. So I keep my first house as kind of the house with people who have mental disabilities. And there are also some reentry people in that house. And then the second house is people with jobs generally. I've got people with jobs and also some elderly people. And then the third house is all elderly people, and it's all private rooms. That's the quiet house.
This really does seem like one of the obvious and best solutions for the housing crisis that we're in, where people just can't afford to own their own home, and often they can't afford to have their own apartment. Since you're coaching this, do you have students all around the country, and how it's not because of the law that just changed in Texas, it makes it sound like it's easier for you to do this there now. But where else can you do this around the country? Because I know, like, just for example, here in Grand Rapids, they passed some sort of ordinance 10 years ago that you can have more than 4 or 5 people living in a house who weren't related. So I'm sure there's a lot of those types of rules. Is there something about your co-living method and strategy that gets around those rules? Or do you really have to be aware on a municipal or city or township location by location what the rules are?
I coach people nationwide, and you can do this business anywhere in the nation. There are situations where homeowners associations, especially HOAs, will give people meaning the operators, a hard time because they'll say that they have a certain number of unrelated people under one roof, and they don't like that. It's usually the HOAs that will give them a hard time, though. Anywhere else, they won't care. Nobody will care. But HOAs do give you a hard time. And the way my business can get around that is that 90% of the people who I house are protected by the Fair Housing Act. So the Fair Housing Act prevents people from discriminating against people who are living as a family under one roof. There are protected classes. And so 90% of the people who I house are one of the protected classes under the Fair Housing Act. So even if the HOA were to get involved and try to shut down the operator's operation, it wouldn't happen. They would win in court. But I don't want my coaching clients to have to deal with that. So I advise all of them not to open their group homes or co-living homes in a place with an HOA.
Are you saying then that they should be able to open in any other type of neighborhood, any other type of house?
Yes, they should. And I always recommend at least a 4-bedroom house for maximum profits.
Let's talk about that. What should people be considering as far as number of bathrooms, levels, size, that type of thing?
At least 4 bedrooms to maximize your profit, because I have a 3-bedroom, and you basically are going to break even if you have a 3-bedroom.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB & Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com.
If you have a 3-bedroom, or do you have like 2 in each bedroom or more?
Right now, I have all private rooms. If I had 2 in each bedroom, I would make more money. But I have private rooms. So it's kind of a give and take, because you can put 2 people in each room, make more money, but you'll have more headache because you've got more people under one roof and more opportunity for people to clash. So it's better to have private rooms if you want the easy route. So I've got the easy route there. I've got all 3 elderly people under one roof, and that house gives me no problems at all. Everybody pays on time. Everybody gets along like a family. So it's wonderful. So at least 4 bedrooms, at least 2 bathrooms, The more bedrooms, the better. Always, the more bedrooms, the better. At least 2 bathrooms, close to public transportation. Because a lot of people who are looking for affordable housing, they don't have cars. They don't have cars. That's why they're looking for affordable housing. They can't afford to live. So close to public transportation is great. What else? An outdoor space is always nice. You don't want people loitering in front of the house because you don't want to be the house that nobody likes on the street. So I make sure everybody hangs out in the back and not the front. But that's pretty much it. I go into a lot of details, though, in my coaching program. Another thing is no carpet. You don't want carpet because it just gets dirty faster. And no pool, just reliability issues, and you have to maintain a pool. So I don't recommend pools.
Are there certain amenities you would want to look for?
Yes. So make sure that you have a dining room area or table that's big enough for everybody to sit. That's always nice to have that, because you don't want people eating in their rooms and end up with roaches and other kind of pests. So dining room table big enough. What else? Decent sized rooms. If you walk in the room and it feels like 2 beds should not be in here, then 2 beds should not be in there. So just make sure it's big enough for 2 people to exist. And if there's not enough closet space for 2 people, then know that you're going to have to invest in like a stand-up wardrobe or something like that, because you got to just be realistic. When you walk into the room, even though it might not be a place that I want to live, it needs to be a place that I could live if I wanted to live. So you want to make sure that it's livable.
Katrina, you mentioned having some horror stories about your residents. Share some of those horror stories with us and how you dealt with them.
I'll give you one of the less scary ones is, and this is crazy because it's the less scary one, but I had a guy who used to live under a bridge. Literally, he was living on the street. And then an organization decided they were going to pay for his rent for him to live somewhere. So he moved into my house. We welcomed him. He was great. But he was so used to living on the street that he wouldn't use the bathroom, which was right next door to his room. So he was peeing in bottles. He was peeing in bottles in his room. And we did room inspections sometimes, and I'm not there. I'm in Los Angeles, and my operations manager is in San Antonio. So he would do periodic room checks sometimes. But if somebody's not giving us a problem and there's no complaints about them, then we're not going in their room all the time. So when he finally moved out, that's when we saw just bottles and bottles of urine in his room. They were all sealed, so it wasn't making a big smell, but wow, bottles of pee.
Do you have to do a certain amount of training for your residents to let them know what the rules are? And you know, how do you avoid that?
Our lease is very thick. It's full of rules. And every time we come across something that we are like, we would not have thought of that, we add it to the lease. For example, no getting on the roof. That shouldn't be in a lease, but it is. It's in our lease. No getting on the roof.
So you said that was the least of the 2 scary stories. What was the other scary story?
The worst one is actually, it's on YouTube. I was interviewed on a podcast by Group Home Riches, and it was called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because I wanted to hear the worst horror story of a group homeowner, and it was mine. And I had a woman a sweet little old lady. She showed up before her move-in date at night. And because she showed up with all of her things, my operations manager let her in without her signing a lease or anything. He let her in and said that we'll just take care of the paperwork tomorrow. Well, she moved in and she started threatening people with a knife. She was taking the cameras down, because we do have cameras in all of our common areas and also cameras on the exterior of the house. She was taking down all of the cameras and disconnecting everything and saying that the house was hers. She intentionally broke the oven. Then finally, when she left, I told my operations manager, lock the doors. She can't, because we'd already told her she had to leave. She had to leave, and she was saying she wasn't going to leave. I said, lock the doors, take her code out of the door, because everybody's got a code. And she had violated so many of the rules anyway. Well, you can't just lock somebody out, because you have to go through the eviction process. And we had already filed for eviction, but she was not officially evicted yet. So the police came and they told me over the phone that I need to let her back into the house. I said, no, I won't, because she's threatening all my other residents. And no, she's not welcome. She can go back to a shelter or something. She cannot come back in my house. Well, because I wouldn't let her back in, the police were very upset with me. They're threatening me over the phone, but I'm like, hey, I'm in California. What are you going to do? And so she reached in her bag and she got a hammer out of her bag, and she proceeds to break every window of my house.
While the police are there?
While the police were there.
And they let her do that?
And they let her do that. And one of the cameras was still on. I'm watching the camera. I'm talking to them on the phone and I'm saying, stop her from breaking. They're like, no, you won't let her back in the house. She can do whatever she wants.
This is Texas. How can they? I can't believe they would let that happen.
It happened. I lived it. It happened.
That's awful.
But that's just one of the things that she did. That's just one of the things. She also, when she finally did get evicted, she would hang out on my front porch. This was days. This was a whole days long saga. She was hanging out on the front porch and she'd leave, she'd come back. So when she finally did get evicted, she had taken one of the cameras down and it was laying in the grass. So I could still see what was going on. I could see people's feet. And apparently, while the camera was laying in the grass, I couldn't see her, but she took all her clothes off in front of the house. So one of the neighbors called the police. The police came over and they're talking to her and I can hear what they're saying. And they asked her if she had been formally evicted. And she said, yes. And they said, well, where's the paperwork? She said, it's over there. So I see the police officer's feet walk. He goes in, he grabs the paper and he doesn't grab it. He comes back to her and he says, I can't read it because it's covered in your fecal matter.
Oh, okay.
So she had pooped on the eviction. Yeah.
Wow. You teach this to students. It's got to be a particular type of person who can know how to deal with these types of challenging residents. I mean, how do you teach that? How do you teach people to handle that?
It's hard to teach, but I attempt to teach that. So I do teach about different demographics and to only house the demographic that you can handle. If you can't handle even mild mental disabilities, because the people who I handle who have mental disabilities, they have to be able to take their own medication. But what if they don't? What if they don't take their medication? So you have to be able to handle that. My mother was a nurse for many years, for 40 years, she was a nurse. And she also had an assisted living facility, and it was for schizophrenics. So I've seen a lot of things. And I'm not a nurse myself. I'm not in the medical field, but I was in the Air Force before, and I was an officer in the Air Force. I've dealt with a lot of people. I've been able to stay calm under pressure in a lot of different situations. I've been deployed to Iraq. So there are things that a lot of people would lose their minds over. And I'm just like, what's next? What's the next step? What do I do? And so I have to teach that. And that's what I teach my coaching clients, is to think about what's next and how are you going to address this? Yeah, you might be upset for a second and then move on. And what are you going to do?
Talk about the systems that you put in place to really make a property like this work for yourself and the residents, and then also make money.
So when I initially opened my first group home, I opened it and I did not have an operations manager. It was in San Antonio, but I'm in Los Angeles. And so I was nervous and I was flying back there all the time. It was every 3 or 4 weeks I was flying out to Texas. The residents didn't even know that I did not live in San Antonio. They just knew that they saw me every 3 to 4 weeks, but they didn't know I didn't live there. And then once I opened my let's back up. So I opened that house. I had cameras. I was watching the cameras from my phone often. And I named one of the residents as the house supervisor. And he was the one who had my direct phone number. And everybody else had the business line, but he had my direct phone number. And he could let me know if an emergency was happening, or they needed to call the police for something, or anything. It could be a leak that was happening. He could let me know. So that eased my mind a little bit when I named someone the house supervisor. That was great. Once I opened my second home, that's when I decided I need to hire someone. And I hired an operations manager. When I hired the operations manager, I hired him as an independent contractor and told him exactly the duties that I wanted him to do. And we started having weekly tag ups. Plus, we could text each other at any time and just stay on top of what's going on. I also signed up for a tenant management system called Rent Ready. And so I put all of my tenants into Rent Ready. I can send notifications through there. My operations manager and I both have access to Rent Ready, and we can both manage payments that are coming in. We can both send notifications out, and maintenance requests from the residents can come to us directly from Rent Ready. They can go into Rent Ready, which is an app on their phone, and submit their maintenance requests through there. We also use a lot of Google Sheets In addition to that, to Rent Ready, and we use Jot Form for an online application on my website for people to apply. It used to be just a paper. I'd talk to people on the phone and ask them questions about, excuse me, if they're going to be a good fit for the house. But now it's all online, so that's great too. We also use Calendly. So if someone wants to book a tour, they can go online and choose which location and where, what time they want to meet the operations manager. And his availability is preloaded into Calendly. So only his availability is in there, and they can select a time and a location, and he can give them a house tour that way. So there are a lot of technology tools that we use to manage the properties from afar. And having the operations manager has made a huge difference. It took a weight off of me.
Break down just the economics of it, just in general. Like what should you spend to purchase a property in ballpark? You know, what's the sweet spot? And how much money can you make off of a property in a given year? And what should you be making off a property?
I tell all of my coaching clients that they should target $2,000 a month. So if they find a place that is $2,000 a month to rent, what we do is use a profit calculator that I came up with to figure out, okay, if there's this many beds in the house, we need to charge this much. And then if we need to charge this much, how much can the market actually withstand? So we look at the market for that area. For example, if I have someone who's in Washington, D.C., we go online and look at different websites that have shared and private rooms in Washington, D.C. to see about how much are people charging for a private room or a shared room. So we take into consideration the cost of the rent, because you can do this in a rental too. It doesn't have to be a mortgage. So the cost of the rent or mortgage, plus the cost of all the utilities and the cost of an operations manager if you choose to hire one. So we take into account all of the expenses and administrative costs as well, like for Rent Ready, I believe it's $12 a month, things like that. Take that into consideration, plus how much you're going to be making off of each bed. So add that up. So if you got 4 rooms and you put 2 beds in each room, that's 8 beds times maybe you're charging $800 a month for shared in the DMV area. It fluctuates. So it could be something where you're charging $400 if you're in Alabama, but you could be charging $650 in San Antonio or $800 in Washington, D.C. So we come up with how much you're going to be making gross and then subtract the expenses and figure out how much you're going to be making each month. And my goal is always $2,000 a month on each house.
Katrina, tell our listeners how they can find out more about you, get a hold of you, and feel free to plug your coaching program and website.
I'm Katrina E. Robinson. You can find me on LinkedIn. Also, go to grouphomeonautopilot.com. grouphomeonautopilot.com. Enter your name and your email there. You can get in contact with me that way and just join my newsletter, and you can always reply back to any message that I send you.
How are you using AI?
I use AI every day. I use AI for my newsletters to caseworkers and social workers. That's who fills my beds for me. So I use AI to help me come up with ideas for my monthly newsletter that I send out. And I also use AI in all of my coaching client meetings. So I use Fathom to record the meetings and then give me a summary, and I send that to my coaching clients.
Which AI are you using to write your newsletter? Is it ChatGPT?
Yes, ChatGPT. I have a YouTube channel, and it's Group Home on Autopilot. And I also use AI to take long form videos and cut them into shorts. So I use Riverside, but I also use Opus Clip.
Well, Katrina, thanks for coming on the show today to talk about co-living and the way that you're doing it, the way you're teaching it. You've shared a lot of great information and insight, and I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.